On the evening of November 21st, 1916, Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria-Hungary passed away in his Spartan iron bed at Schönbrunn Palace. At 86 years old, his 68-year reign had outlasted any Habsburg predecessor and the lifespans of most of his subjects. His vast empire encompassed 13 nations and 52 million souls. His dynasty had reigned for over 600 years, and his final words were simple instructions for the next day, tomorrow, at 3. It was his customary wake-up time, one he would never again answer, yet his death did not conclude the Habsburg saga. Instead, it began its most calamitous chapter. Within 2 years, his successor would forfeit everything: the throne, the empire, the palaces, and ultimately his life at the age of 34. The children destined for Europe's greatest dynasty would instead inherit a legacy of exile, poverty, and a century of wandering. Crown Prince Otto, merely 9 years old when he witnessed his father die on a remote Atlantic island, would be raised to restore the dynasty, only to ultimately relinquish his birthright for the chance to set foot in his homeland once more. Empress Zita, widowed at 29, would wear mourning black for the next 67 years, while Archduke Felix, born at Schönbrunn and christened by Franz Joseph himself, was banned from Austria for life. And the youngest daughter, Elizabeth, would be born 2 months after her father's passing, named by a man already gone, who somehow knew she would be a girl. This was the fate of the Habsburg bloodline after the empire's fall, and how the last emperor's children went from inheriting the grandest throne in Europe to raising their own children on dandelion salads in Canadian exile. Subscribe if you desire more stories of royal bloodlines and the fates of those born too close to power. The Habsburgs had held power since 1273. By the time Franz Joseph died in 1916, they had worn crowns for almost 650 years and held the throne of the Holy Roman Empire for 4 centuries. At their peak, they ruled Spain, the Netherlands, half of Italy, Austria, Hungary, Bohemia, and colonies stretching from the Philippines to Peru. Their guiding principle was simple: let others wage war. You, happy Austria, marry. They constructed their empire not through conquest, but through calculated marriages, absorbing kingdoms as other dynasties took provinces. By 1916, the empire had contracted significantly from its greatest size, but it remained a formidable power. Austria-Hungary governed Austrians, Hungarians, Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, Ukrainians, Romanians, Croats, Slovenes, Serbs, and Italians. It was Europe's second largest country by territory and its third largest by population. Franz Joseph had held this disparate collection of peoples together through his sheer longevity, the force of tradition, and an unwavering commitment to duty. Yet his reign was defined by one tragedy after another. His brother, Maximilian, who was installed as Emperor of Mexico with French support, was captured by Republican forces and executed by firing squad in 1867. His only son, Crown Prince Rudolph, died in a murder-suicide with his teenage mistress at the Mayerling hunting lodge in 1889, a scandal the court tried desperately to conceal. His wife, the beautiful and melancholic Empress Elizabeth, was stabbed through the heart by an Italian anarchist on a Geneva quayside in 1898, and his nephew and successor, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914. It was the very spark that ignited the First World War. By November 1916, Franz Joseph had outlived nearly everyone he had ever cherished, a relic from a bygone age. He continued to rise at 3 each morning, work at his desk for 12 hours a day, and wear the simple uniform of an infantry officer. He had become the embodiment of the empire, and when he died, the empire began to perish with him. The throne went not to a son or grandson, but to a grandnephew. Franz Ferdinand's children were barred from succession because his wife was not of adequate royal blood, a morganatic marriage that invalidated their claim. This meant the crown passed to Archduke Karl, the 29-year-old son of Franz Joseph's late nephew. Karl had never expected to become emperor. He was third in line until the assassination just 2 years before. He was wholly unprepared to take charge of a crumbling empire in the midst of a devastating war. Karl's wife was Zita of Bourbon-Parma, a 24-year-old princess from a minor Italian duchy who had excellent French connections. They had married in 1911 and were deeply devoted to each other, an anomaly in an age of arranged royal matches. By November of 1916, they already had 4 children. Crown Prince Otto was born in 1912, Archduchess Adelheid in 1914, Archduke Robert in 1915, and Archduke Felix in May of 1916. Felix was christened in the presence of Emperor Franz Joseph just months before the old monarch's passing. 4 more children were still to come. Karl Ludwig in 1918, Rudolf in 1919, Charlotte in 1921, and Elizabeth in 1922. These children were born as archdukes and archduchesses of Austria, royalty to numerous kingdoms, living in the 1,441-room Schönbrunn Palace. They were attended by a legion of servants, chamberlains, and tutors. Dining from gold plate, they followed ancient court rituals dating to the 16th century. The children had no experience of a normal home, shop, or restaurant. Their insulated world, however, was already on the verge of collapse. By late 1916, Austria-Hungary was losing the war amid food shortages and military defeats. The empire's varied nationalities, including Czechs and Poles, were urgently demanding independence. Karl inherited not a kingdom, but an unfolding disaster. 600 years of Habsburg dominion were about to end in just 24 months. The children destined for crowns would instead face exile and oblivion. Karl was crowned King of Hungary on December 30th, 1916. He immediately sought a way to exit the war, aided by his wife's brothers, Prince Sixtus and Prince Xavier, who helped him initiate secret peace talks with France. In a letter dated March 24th, 1917, Karl offered concessions, which meant betraying his German allies. But the negotiations failed. The talks collapsed over Italian territorial demands. But the controversy was not over. In April 1918, the French premier published Karl's secret letters to sow discord. The ensuing scandal disgraced Karl and all but ended Austrian independence. From then on, Germany took control of the Habsburg military and economy. During the autumn of 1918, the empire began to disintegrate rapidly. On October 16th, Karl's manifesto proposed a federation in a desperate final gamble. It was far too late. Czechoslovakia declared independence within days. Soon after, the South Slavs and German Austria also formed separate states. On November 11th, 1918, Karl signed a carefully drafted declaration at Schönbrunn Palace. In it, he renounced all participation in governmental affairs, but he purposefully avoided the word abdication, never accepting the loss of his throne. 2 days later, a similar declaration was signed for Hungary. Republics were proclaimed in German Austria on November 12th and in Hungary on November 16th. The dynasty that ruled for 6 centuries was now confined to a hunting lodge with guards of uncertain allegiance. No one knew if they were protectors or captors. The family spent the winter of 1918 to 1919 at a Habsburg hunting estate. It was a tense, uncertain time, with revolutionary soldiers in the area. The new Republican government was distrustful, and Karl faced a real risk of arrest. Help arrived unexpectedly from Britain's King George V, who sent an officer to escort the family safely from Austria. They departed for Switzerland on March 23, 1919. As their train crossed the border on March 24, 1919, Karl issued a final proclamation. The Feldkirch Manifesto revoked his previous renunciations and voided all Republican laws. This defiance led to swift retaliation. On April 3, 1919, the Austrian Parliament enacted the Habsburg Law. It was a historic and sweeping expropriation of royal authority and property. The law permanently unseated the House of Habsburg-Lorraine and exiled Karl's immediate family forever. It seized all court properties, family funds, and assets entirely without compensation. Other members of the Habsburg family could return to Austria only if they signed written declarations, renouncing all claims to the dynasty and pledging loyalty to the new republic, thereby losing their vast estates overnight. Lost was the imperial treasury, which held the crown jewels, the Holy Lance, and the largest cut emerald on earth. Gone were their income, their staff, their financial securities, and their vast art collections. With a single signature, Central Europe's most affluent family became refugees, dependent upon the charity of foreign nations. The family found refuge in Switzerland, residing first at Schloss Warteg near Rorschach, then at Villa Prangens on Lake Geneva. Yet, Karl could not reconcile with his fate. He remained convinced he could regain his throne, or, at minimum, the Hungarian portion of it. In March of 1921, Karl made his first attempt to restore his Hungarian monarchy, traveling incognito with a fake Spanish passport, a false name, and a shaved mustache. On Easter Sunday, he arrived at the royal palace in Budapest to confront Miklos Horthy, the regent, who was governing Hungary on the king's behalf. Karl declared his readiness to take back his duties. Horthy declined. The little Entente, comprising Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia, had announced that any Habsburg restoration would be considered an act of war, a risk Horthy refused to take. Karl was made to leave, became gravely ill during the trip, and was cast out of Hungary on April 5th. But Karl would try once more. On October 20th, 1921, he and Zita, then pregnant with their 8th child, flew in a small plane from Zurich to western Hungary. This time, Karl possessed military support. Nearly 2,000 soldiers pledged their allegiance, and he started to advance on Budapest. By railway. For several days, it appeared the restoration might actually succeed. The royal couple was met by cheering crowds. Military units defected to Karl's cause, turning the advance into a triumphal march. It concluded at Budaörs, on the edge of Budapest, on October the 23rd. Horthy had positioned loyalist soldiers and student militias to obstruct the path. A short battle ensued, and 19 people died. Unwilling to ignite a civil war, Karl commanded his troops to cease their fire. He was taken into custody and interned at Tihany Abbey on Lake Balaton. The Allied powers determined a Habsburg on any throne was unacceptable. Great Britain, especially, demanded Karl's complete removal from Europe. On November 1st, 1921, Karl and Zita were boarded onto the British gunboat HMS Glowworm and were taken down the Danube to the Black Sea, where they moved to the cruiser HMS Cardiff. Their new home was to be Madeira, a Portuguese island in the Atlantic Ocean, far removed from any throne Karl might attempt to take back. The family set foot on Madeira on November 19, 1921. They first resided at Villa Victoria in Funchal, before moving to the humbler Quinta do Monte in the hills above the city. Their children came to join them in February 1922. The one-time rulers of 52 million people were now living in a damp, drafty home with poor heating. They were almost out of money. The great wealth that had once sustained the largest court in Europe had vanished. Karl developed a cold on March 9, 1922, during a walk in Funchal. That cold escalated to bronchitis. The bronchitis became severe pneumonia. There was little the doctors could do. As his health failed, Karl endured 2 heart attacks. On April 1, 1922, at the Quinta do Monte, Emperor Karl I of Austria and King Károly IV of Hungary passed away. He was 34 years old. His 9-year-old son, Crown Prince Otto was by his side, as was Zita. At 30 years old, now a widow, she was alone with 8 children, with the youngest yet to be born. Karl's last words were directed to his wife. He whispered, "I love you so much." He was laid to rest in the Church of Our Lady of the Mount in Monte, Madeira. His heart was later taken and enshrined at Muri Abbey in Switzerland. In 2004, Pope John Paul II beatified Karl during a Mass in St. Peter's Square, honoring his Christian faith, his work for peace, and his dedication to his family. His feast day is October 21st, the date of his wedding to Zita. Zita of Bourbon-Parma was empress for 2 years and a widow for 67. From the day Karl passed until her own death, she wore only mourning black. She did not remarry. She maintained an unwavering belief that her husband was a saint and that their banishment was a grave injustice. Her own path of exile would lead her across 3 continents. Following Madeira, Spain offered them sanctuary, first at the Pardo Palace and later at the Uribarren Palace in the Basque Country. It was there the children were educated, adding Spanish to the German and French they already knew. Next was Belgium, where the family took up residence at Steenakerzeel Castle, near Brussels, in 1929. Life found a measure of stability as the older children went to university. The Nazi invasion in 1940 destroyed it all. The Habsburgs were known anti-Nazi voices. Hitler had ordered Otto's death in absentia and had even named the annexation of Austria Operation Otto. Because of this, they had to escape. Zita and her children fled through Europe, eventually finding refuge in the United States. Their years in America were their most difficult. The family, once inhabitants of palaces, now endured profound poverty. Through it all, Zita remained resolute. She ensured her children never forgot their identity or the throne they had lost. Following the war, Zita lived in Switzerland for her final 3 decades. She was forbidden from entering Austria, as she refused to renounce the Habsburg claim. At 90 years old, she was finally permitted to return in 1982. After 63 years away, she was met by crowds eager to see the last empress. Zita died on March 14, 1989, at the age of 96. Her funeral was a grand imperial affair, set for the anniversary of Karl's death. Over 6,000 people attended the Mass at St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna. The funeral coach that carried Franz Joseph in 1916 was used for Zita in 1989. She was interred in the imperial crypt, joining the ancestors of the man she married 78 years prior. Her heart was laid to rest beside Karl's. Their son Otto died at 98 in 2011. His entire life was shaped by Zita's goal to restore the dynasty. She provided him with an education in languages, history, law, and statecraft. He was taught to believe the abdication was void, and that his father's crown would one day be his. Otto became a handsome, intelligent, and charming man with a doctorate in political science. Fluent in 8 languages, he forged relationships with leaders throughout Europe. The Nazis viewed him as a significant threat, naming an operation after him. Hitler gave a personal order for Otto's death in absentia. During the war, Otto advocated for a free Austria while in America. Post-war restoration proved impossible under the new republic. Otto's focus shifted from reclaiming the throne to fostering European integration. He believed a united Europe was the only solution to the nationalism that had destroyed his family's empire. In 1961, Otto made the momentous decision to legally re-enter Austria. This required him to sign a declaration renouncing his dynastic claims and loyalty to the House of Habsburg. On May 31st, 1961, he signed what he privately called worthless rubbish. Though he felt it was meaningless, the document allowed him to return home. His arrival on October 31st, 1966, his first time on Austrian soil in 48 years, ignited a political crisis. 250,000 workers went on strike in protest. For weeks, Austria was gripped by a debate over whether a Habsburg could be trusted. Otto persevered, building a new career as a politician advocating for European unity. For more than 3 decades, he was president of the International Pan-European Union. He was elected to the European Parliament in 1979. There, he served for 20 years, working tirelessly for a more integrated Europe. He was a major advocate for including Central and Eastern European nations after communism's collapse. In 1951, Otto married Princess Regina of Saxe-Meiningen, with whom he had 7 children. Regina passed away in February 2010. Otto died on July 4, 2011, at 98 years old. His funeral was the final great Habsburg ceremony, his coffin draped in the family flag. Following a 13-day mourning period, his body was entombed in Vienna's imperial crypt on July 16, 2011. His heart was interred separately in Hungary. It was a last gesture connecting him to the kingdom his father had desperately tried to save. Adelheid, his eldest sister, born in 1914, never married. Post-war, she pursued journalism in Bavaria, focusing on aiding her mother and preserving family unity until her death in 1971. Zita was barred from the funeral, a harsh testament to the realities of exile. Robert, born in 1915, was named head of the House of Austria-Este at the tender age of 2. During World War II, he served with the Royal Air Force and subsequently acted as the Habsburg representative in London. His 1953 marriage to Princess Margherita of Savoy-Aosta forged a union between 2 royal houses in exile. In 1984, his son Lorenz married Princess Astrid of Belgium and now leads the Austria-Este line. Robert passed away in 1996 and was interred at Muri Abbey. Felix's birth occurred at Schönbrunn Palace on May 31, 1916, and his christening was attended by the Emperor Franz Joseph himself, marking one of the old emperor's last public acts. Felix later pursued a military career. In 1937, he entered the Theresian Military Academy. Following the Anschluss, he fled and later served alongside his brother, Karl Ludwig, in the United States Army's 101st Infantry Battalion, known as the Free Austria Battalion. Felix refused to sign the renunciation mandated by Habsburg law, contending it was a violation of his human rights to be forced to forsake his heritage. The Austrian government did not concur, and as a result, Felix was barred from the country for his entire adult life. He was granted a single 3-day entry in April 1989 for the sole purpose of attending his mother's funeral. In 1952, he wed Princess Anna Eugenie of Arenberg, with whom he had 7 children. Felix passed away on September 6, 2011, in Mexico City at 95 years of age, as the last surviving child of Karl and Zita. Karl Ludwig had been born on March 10, 1918, his birth, the last to be heralded by a 101-gun salute, occurred just as the empire was ceasing to exist. He, like his brother Felix, served in the U.S. military during the war. And in late 1944, he and his brother Rudolf embarked on a perilous mission. They infiltrated Nazi-occupied Austria, using assumed identities to connect with the O5 resistance network. Their goal was to aid in organizing opposition to the regime. Karl Ludwig never relinquished his Habsburg rights. His 1950 marriage to Princess Yolande de Ligne produced 4 children. He passed away on December 11, 2007. He was interred in the imperial crypt with full Habsburg ceremonial tradition, an honor recognizing his resistance work. Rudolf, the first child born in exile, arrived on September 5, 1919, at the Villa Prangens in Switzerland. He was not yet a year old when his father launched the first unsuccessful bid to regain the Hungarian throne. Rudolf's education spanned Spain, Belgium, and Quebec, and he too infiltrated Austria during the war's final months to aid the resistance. Afterward, he pursued a career as a banker on Wall Street. Twice married, He fathered 5 children and passed away in May 2010 at the age of 90. The 2 youngest daughters, both born in exile with no memory of their father, would lead remarkably different lives. Charlotte was born at Villa Prangins on March 1st, 1921, a mere month before Karl's first restoration attempt. She was barely a year old when her father passed away on Madeira. After earning degrees from Laval University and Fordham University, Charlotte chose an unconventional path for an imperial archduchess. She began a career in social work in East Harlem, Manhattan, then one of New York City's most impoverished neighborhoods. For 13 years, she used the pseudonym Charlotte de Bar to protect her privacy, aiding disadvantaged families while concealing her royal lineage. Her life changed in 1956 when she married George, Duke of Mecklenburg. After his death in 1963 left her a childless widow at 42, she resumed her social work with Caritas in Munich. Charlotte's life, defined by service and humility, ended on July 23, 1989, 4 months after her mother. She is interred in Germany at the chapel of Inzigkofen. Elizabeth, born posthumously on May 31, 1922, at the Royal Palace of El Pardo in Spain, arrived 2 months after her father's death. Karl had selected her name prior to his death, somehow sensing he would have a daughter. Her namesake was Empress Elizabeth, the wife of Franz Joseph, famously known as Sisi. Forever the youngest, Elizabeth was perpetually positioned at the end of the line in family portraits. Educated at Laval University during the war, she married Prince Heinrich of Liechtenstein in 1949, raising 5 children at Schloss Waldstein in Styria, Austria. She was unique among Karl and Zita's children for spending a significant portion of her life residing in Austria. By that time, the stringent renunciation requirements had been relaxed. Heinrich passed away in 1991. Elizabeth passed away on January 6, 1993, at 70 years old. The House of Habsburg, however, did not vanish. It evolved. The family is currently led by Karl von Habsburg, born in 1961, who is the son of Otto and Regina and the grandson of the final emperor. As noble titles remain outlawed under Austrian law, his legal name in the Republic is Karl Habsburg Lothringen. He has no attachment to being called Archduke, stating that he is not vain and finds titles unimportant. People use these honorifics out of deference to history and his family's role within it. Karl was a member of the European Parliament from 1996 to 1999 and holds a reserve captain's commission in the Austrian Air Force. Between 2008 and 2020, he directed Blue Shield International, an organization that safeguards cultural heritage in conflict zones. In June 2024, though still recovering from cancer therapy, he hosted the 750th anniversary of the Habsburg Dynasty at Vienna's Palafestel, celebrating the family's journey from minor Swiss nobles to sovereigns of half of Europe. Born in 1997, Karl's son Ferdinand is the heir to the house, but he is chasing a different kind of victory as a professional race car driver. In 2021, he achieved victory in the LMP2 class at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. He currently competes in the hypercar division for the Alpine team and dismisses the irony when interviewers mention a Habsburg racing cars. A devout Catholic, he is also engaged in youth ministry. He approximates that there are about 600 living Habsburgs today and mentioned to the New York Times that they maintain a WhatsApp group. Karl's daughter Eleanor, born in 1994, is a gemologist and jewelry designer who wed Belgian racing driver Jerome D'Ambrosio in 2020. Their son, who was born in October 2021, is named Otto in honor of his great-great-grandfather, the last crown prince. Their daughter arrived in August 2024 and was named Zita for the empress, who held the family together through 67 years of mourning. Georg von Habsburg, Karl's younger brother, entered diplomacy. He was Hungary's ambassador to France from 2020 to 2025 and is now the ambassador to Spain. Edward Habsburg Lothringen, a great-great-grandson of Franz Joseph I, represents Hungary as ambassador to the Holy See and is a well-known author and social media personality. In November 2025, the family unveiled an incredible secret. The Florentine Diamond, a fabled 137-carat yellow gem from the Habsburg crown jewels, was never truly lost. For over 100 years, the diamond was thought to have vanished amid the chaos of 1918. It was assumed stolen, sold, or perhaps recut, but the reality was simpler and more surprising. On November 1st, 1918, as the empire fell, Karl had certain jewels taken from the imperial treasury. These treasures accompanied the family into exile. When Zita escaped the Nazis in 1940, she took the jewels with her to Canada. She stored them in a Quebec bank vault, requesting the location stay hidden for 100 years after Karl's death. The family respected her wish. The century of secrecy concluded in 2022, 100 years after Karl's passing on Madeira. The diamond and around 15 other family heirlooms came out of a vault where they had been undisturbed since the Second World War. As a gesture of gratitude for the sanctuary the country provided in their darkest hour, the family intends to display them in a Canadian museum. The Habsburgs may have lost their empire, but their lineage continued. They spread across the globe and remade themselves as politicians, diplomats, and social workers, and even racing drivers, and they persevered. 600 descendants are scattered across 3 continents, connected by WhatsApp and gathering for anniversaries and funerals. The palaces are now property of the Republic. The crown jewels reside in museums, yet the name survives and the bloodline endures. Not all royal houses were as lucky. Some dynasties did not just forfeit their thrones. They lost everything, including their own lives. A mere 2 years after Karl stepped away from his governmental duties, another emperor was confronted with a similar decision. Tsar Nicholas II of Russia had given up his throne in March 1917, hoping to protect his family by relinquishing his crown. He was mistaken. In a basement in Yekaterinburg in July 1918, the Bolsheviks murdered Nicholas, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children. The Romanov dynasty, after ruling Russia for 300 years, did not end in exile, but in a massacre. If you'd like to learn what happened to the Tsar's family after he fell from power, and why none of them managed to escape, see our video on the Romanovs.